today's meeting of Democrats of Greater Tucson. Today we welcome former Attorney General Terry Goddard, who will be joined by Chris Hawkins, who is the Southern Arizona coordinator for Stop Dark Money. He was the mayor of Phoenix, and he was the Attorney General from 2001 to 2003. Talk about stopping dark money. I think we all know what dark money is. It's millions of dollars that are contributed to candidates and campaigns without any record at all of who put the money in there. So Stop Dark Money supports a ballot initiative that would require all major contributors to clearly identify themselves if they invest more than $5,000 in support of a campaign or a candidate. And the dark money is pretty much responsible for all the negative ads, the misleading information, even the outright lies you find that voters are bombarded with. With that, Terry, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a pleasure to be with DGT today. Arizona started out in 1912 as a very progressive state. We had a long ticket. We elected just about everybody at the state level, and we were very, very progressive. And somehow things have gotten off track. The point you just made about the effort in the legislature to get rid of voting centers, to get rid of mail-in ballots, to get something that we participate in by about 80%, to basically turn back the clock in terms of voters' rights is just appalling. And I know DGT has taken a strong position, as you always do, against all of that. But it's a heritage that we sometimes forget, and I think we should today especially be reminded of. But thank you again for the chance to be back with you. This is my third rodeo on trying to stop dark money. As you know, DGT has been with us every step of the way, and that has been a real source of help. I probably should explain why it's the third time. Many of you know, because you've been some of our strongest helpers along the road. But the first one I thought qualified for the ballot, but Americans for Prosperity, one of the most important national groups that champions dark money in politics, they came after us in court and were able to nullify enough of our signatures that we were just a few thousand short of getting qualified for the ballot. Then the next year, 2020, we were on track, we were getting there, and then COVID hit. And so all of us took a very, very serious hit back in March of 2020. And we had to stop collecting signatures at a time when I really think we were right there. This time, the third time, hopefully is a charm. I don't know quite what the validity of that statement is, but we're trying very hard. We've got a new coordinator in Pima County, Chris Hawkins, who you mentioned. Larry is going to be on the program with me today, and I will like to introduce her to everybody a little bit later, after I've had a chance to sort of go over the basics of what we're trying to do with Stop Dark Money. I think, and again, my apologies for those of you who know it well, have read the petition and have been with us from the beginning. But what this is trying to do is to establish in Arizona a right to know the original source of all funds spent to influence our votes. And that's a transposition of the first words of this piece of legislation. And I think it pretty much says it all. The right to know is what we're here talking about. And right now, Arizona perhaps leads the country, in fact, they do, in terms of tolerating anonymous cash in our elections. As a percentage of the total amount of political money that's spent, dark money is higher here than it is in other states, in any other state. And the reason for that is our legislature has been bent over backwards, essentially, to tolerate the dark voices. They basically have said in Arizona law that if you're a 501c4, and that's the group that does most of the anonymous campaigning, you don't have to register as a political campaign. You don't have to even register as a PAC. You just spend money. And the result of that is that tens of millions of dollars have been spent in Arizona elections to try to influence our vote. I think many of you know that perhaps the poster child example is back in 2014 when Sandra Kennedy was running for re-election on the Corporation Commission, and one other Democrat was running the utility in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona Public Service, basically secretly spent, we now know, $10.3 million to elect a slate of 2 Republicans to the Corporation Commission. That's amazing. I mean, it would be illegal in most states, but not in Arizona. And the result was that they put those 2 people regulating our utilities and the rates that the utilities can charge. And the folks in Phoenix ended up paying $95 million a year more as a result in their utility bills because of those 2 commissioners. So APS was paid back royally for the $10 million that they invested. And that, unfortunately, still is the law today. It could happen again. Could happen with Tucson Electric. It could happen with any other corporation that sort of wants to get a special deal in the state of Arizona. So we need to stop that, in my opinion. We can go from last to first if we can get the Stop Dark Money initiative. And I know that's something that's near to your hearts and certainly to mine. And I think it's got, if we can get on the ballot, it has an extraordinarily good chance of being successful. Our polling statewide shows numbers in excess of 90% of our fellow state voters believe that transparency is a really good thing. We basically, in the last poll, read them our 100-word statement from this proposition, and they responded at 94% favorable. Obviously, it goes beyond party lines. It's something that Arizonans believe is just fair and something that we desperately need to do. So one question I know I'm going to get is, how are we doing? And the answer is very, very positively. We're doing better than we have at this time in the 2020 election cycle, when we were so close to getting on the ballot. We have a goal of 300,000 signatures. And as of this morning, I did the math, and we're at 229,819 signatures in hand. So we've made a lot of progress since we filed. You might be amused, we filed on May the 4th of 2021. So May the 4th be with you was our rallying cry. Didn't mean it that way, but that's just how it turned out. And hopefully that's a good sign for this effort. But in the last couple of months, I've got to say, our signatures have sort of trailed off. We're not as strong as we were last summer, even with all the heat. And the result is that I'm concerned. I think we need to double down and to make clear that everybody who's favorable to this proposition has a chance to sign, and everybody who supports it, hopefully all the DGT members, have a petition in your kitchen or in the back of your car or somewhere where if somebody wants to sign, you're able to facilitate that. And to help us do that, especially in Southern Arizona, I'd like to introduce you to Chris Hawkins. She's formerly a resident of Pima County. She went away. She defected for a short while and lived up in the Bay Area, but now she's back. And we're very pleased to have her helping to coordinate. She steps into the shoes of Merrill Eisenberg, who was a strong DGT member, I know, may still be, and Amy Graves, who helped us a lot with the last turnaround. And now Chris is trying to get her feet on the ground. She started at the beginning of this year, and we need all the help we can get in Pima County. So Chris, you want to say a little word of introduction and hello? And
hi, everybody. It's really, really, really nice to be here. As Terry said, I'm your Southern Arizona coordinator, and most of our work right now is going to have to focus in Pima County. I'm also working with Cochise County and some of the other southern ones, such as Santa Cruz and Greenlee and Graham. I am concerned as well, especially because we're revving up here kind of late. I'm trying to do as much as I can with circulators who already existed, who've been very helpful to us. Getting them re-energized. A lot of people have some fatigue, and we need your help to kind of motivate. And also new people. We're getting a lot of new people. I've met a lot of folks over at the Pima Dems office, which is having petition signings every Saturday from 11 to 1. I just was able to talk to a couple people who will be volunteers. And if anyone here wants to help out and help me personally with collecting all the events you know of, sharing your success stories, what has worked for you, that would be great. The thing is, I'm trying to help people get petitions to them, but also collaborating with all of you so that we can make this work in the next 3 months. That's about what we have. We have kind of till June to mid-June, because we have to gather the signatures and validate them, make sure we get the proper ones submitted. You can correct me if I'm wrong on those dates, Terry, but that's approximately it. So anything you can do to help. And I will say one more thing before I give it back to Terry with all your questions. I am holding Zoom meetings every Tuesday night from 5:30 to 6:30. And we may do a little huddle outside once it's a little lighter later. And so I would love to see you there. The point of the meeting and the agenda will always include a time to ask questions about the petitions, updates where we are in our progress. I like to have a speaker or two come, especially to share success stories about what has worked for you. For example, Hollis Lyon up at Saddlebrook Downs has been very successful with the driveway parties where people just drive by, they can see it, they can come out, it's COVID safe, they can sign. So I need your ideas and your help, and really appreciate that you're here and I'm here sharing, and thank you. Please get in touch. So with that, I'll leave it to Terry.
Thanks to Chris and thanks to DGT for giving us a few minutes to talk about this. I've been a long-term member, but I haven't been solicited this year, Mr. President. So if there's a sign up that I can get involved with, I really want to be part again of this group. I think you help to keep the light alive in Southern Arizona, and that means for the entire state. You've been a great leader.
I was just going to say thank you very much. I'm going to unleash our membership director, Susie Anderson, on you and get you to join DGT. Thank you so much.
He follows in the steps of Martin Bacall, arm twister I think I've ever known.
Let's open the floor for questions. It's one of the great benefits of Democrats of Greater Tucson. You get to ask questions and get answers. We have a question from Warren. Barbara, go right.
I wanted to mention some experiences I've had with circulating petitions, and that is that there are a lot out there from previous iterations. I was walking for a candidate in another neighborhood than mine, and when I walked into the house, the lady, this was a couple of years ago, a lady pulled out a petition and she said, "Will you sign my petition?" It was one of yours, but it was several versions back. And I'm wondering if there's any process for collecting those old ones that are probably not legitimate anymore.
We are trying, and there's a couple of very simple things that we try to do with this one that help to make that distinction. It is confusing when this is the third time that we've tried to stop anonymous cash. The prior effort, as I'm sure many of you will remember, was called Outlaw Dirty Money. And we've changed that name partly because of what you just said, that people are confused as to whether they've already signed it. So now it's Stop Dark Money is the tagline that we use, and that's what's in the petition. It's also this time legislative. Last time we were trying to get constitutional change. That requires 100,000 more signatures. And I wanted that, frankly, my mental health is at stake here. Not going to try this more than 3 times. And so we went for the lower number of signatures. And now we're, as I said a minute ago, we're getting very, very close. But we need your help to get over the finish line. So different name, legislative versus constitutional. And I guess the most, most salient detail is ask people if they're confused, if they've signed a petition on transparency this year, because this one started on May the 4th, as I mentioned. Anything since then, they obviously can't sign again. But if it was before May the 4th of last year, they signed a different petition.
Can I just add, that's the kind of thing I'm trying to do with the Zoom meeting so that people can join and we can share and learn.
We have a hand up from Heather Borman. Go right ahead, please, and ask your question.
So I kind of want to know what happened. I know that the dark money forces are coming at you every way they can, and I'd sort of like to know what happened to the last two efforts.
You're absolutely right about that. I did try to summarize it right at the beginning, but the first time I thought, and I still believe, we legally were entitled to be on the ballot. That was back in 2018. And we got attacked by Americans for Prosperity, the Koch brothers operation nationally. They spent, we'll never know how much, but my estimate was well over $1 million trying to challenge each of our signatures. And we were very close. When we filed, we knew that it was probably in jeopardy because we only had about 30,000 more signatures than absolutely needed. And some of those we know from experience will not be valid. They went after everyone, and we ended up about 2,000 signatures short. And the Supreme Court, I won't go into all the details, but the Supreme Court affirmed the trial court's decision, which was based on, frankly, erroneous facts. But I'll try not to relitigate that here today. So that kept us off the ballot in 2018. In 2020, when you were helping so much, we got really close. In March of 2020, we had 300,000 signatures. Our goal that year was 347. And so I believe we were about to make it, but COVID hit.
You know, and I also want to say that I got snagged actually at the DMV. So that's a really good place to collect petitions if you're going to try to do a bunch. And do you still have paid signature gatherers?
We started out with a team of, we had a couple of very generous supporters who wanted to make sure that we made it. So they were kind enough to get us a slug of paid signatures at the beginning, which is why we're so close today.
Great.
Let me add one thing. I think Heather's point is really well taken. And there are some new things in this petition that frankly weren't in the previous one. I'm not saying it was deficient. I don't think it was. But this time there are two items that I think do a lot to help us be sure that we'll survive a legal challenge. Now that's, I make that distinction. They're petition signature challenges. That's one kind of legal challenge. And then there are ones that go after the substance of your proposition. And we believe the major attack would come from probably, again, Americans for Prosperity, maybe the Goldwater Institute here in Phoenix. They've been the main spokespeople for dark money. And what they say, I don't think it's legally valid, but what they say is that a proposition like this might endanger the privacy of certain contributors. Well, they make it look kind of, somebody said something that they may regret, but they were right. That's not a valid statement. All of us who contribute to a political campaign, if it's over $50, as you know, have to give our name and our employer and our address, our home address, by the way. So I don't know why they think some people's privacy is more important than others, but they obviously do. But we wanted to protect against that argument. So you notice, and Larry said this in the introduction, the cutoff for disclosure is $5,000 or more. My theory on that is that $5,000 is a pretty knowledgeable contributor. They're not a small contributor, somebody who might have been, making a contribution that they could be harmed if it was somehow disclosed to their employer, for example, that they had given $100 to Planned Parenthood or to some other more controversial cause. Obviously, they're not going to be caught in this disclosure. Now, I'm not here saying that we should do away with our current disclosure for everybody who gives over $50. I think it's important to know who's involved in supporting political speech. And that's what the Supreme Court has said over and over again. They've said there is no right to hide in our Constitution if you're a contributor to political speech. The other thing we did, and this is a little more in the weeds, but it's new for this proposition. We basically said that if if somebody, if this is passed and the disclosure has to be made with the Secretary of State's office, anybody who is spending money for persuasion who previously did not disclose their contributors, they were C4s largely, they have to tell their contributor that they might be disclosed. And they give them 3 weeks after that disclosure to say, I'd prefer not to be disclosed. I want my money used for something other than political speech, something other than media advertising. And I think that's really important because it means nobody's going to get snookered. Nobody's going to get disclosed who didn't fully know that this was possible. And I think that gives us an extra level of defense that we didn't have before, and frankly, could be important in the future. The Arizona Supreme Court, or if it's federally challenged, the US Supreme Court. Thank you. I didn't mean to go deeply in the weeds, but I thought you might find that interesting.
That's good.
It's very interesting. And let's turn now to Lee Oler, a member of our board who has her hand raised. Go ahead, Lee.
If Mayor Eisenberg has a list of the previous people that checked out petitions, I don't know, Chris, if you have that or if you can get that information from Merle, but it would be wonderful if you could. And I think a lot of us would be glad to call if Terry thinks that's a good idea.
Well, it's a great idea. That's
Looking for volunteers like yourself is heartwarming. That's exactly what we need. I'm one person right now. I'm relearning a lot about where to go and what's happening in Tucson. I've got those names. We have a database, so I can share phone numbers with you and that sort of thing. If you come to the Zoom tonight, which I did put, or tomorrow night, which I did put in the chat, we'll be talking more about those kinds of things. So, yep.
I have orchestra tomorrow night. I can't come. But anyhow, I maybe I can
Call me. Just
listen
call
to
me.
it later.
Just call me.
Pardon me, Terry. Oh, I didn't get your phone number either.
we'll get in touch with you, and thank you for that comment because
Okay, great. Thank you, Terry.
people have done this twice before. They're justifiably tired. And I hope we can make the point that this time we're going to make it with their help.
Everything clean.
Thanks, Larry. Terry, I have a petition, and Chris, from last summer that I got. Is that the one we're currently using? When all the other petitions came out, you also sent out the dark money petitions. So I have those, and I was told that they needed to be in by July 7th. Of 2022. Are they the petitions that we need?
They are, and July 7th is the final deadline. But let me be clear, Chris had it right. If anybody waits until the 7th, I'm afraid those signatures aren't going to count because we won't have had time to get them into the process. So please consider the end of June to be the deadline. And the correct petition, we're not allowed to put editorial comments, in red across the top of the petition. But this one in the 100-word statement starts out, this Voters' Right to Know Act secures for Arizona voters the right to know who is trying to influence Arizona electors. That's the one we're talking about. It's an act, not a constitutional amendment. And I guess showing it this way probably doesn't say very much. I don't know if it even shows up. There we go. But it's the act, not the constitutional amendment. If you've got constitutional amendment petitions, please just, unfortunately, we have to destroy those so we don't get confused.
From Andrea Kennedy. Andrea, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Larry. I might have signed a petition before last May or last March. And how do I find out if I signed the new one? And if I sign it again, will that be a problem?
Thank you for that question, because I know people there's so much in Arizona law that makes it hard to pass initiative petitions that, and I'm sure you know all those details about signing between the lines and being very careful. But if you have any question, again, if you signed since May and you can remember that you did, for instance, last summer, then that's the current petition. So don't do it again. If you're not sure, please let me encourage you to sign, because the worst that will happen, and frankly, the Secretary of State will pick up duplicates. And so the second signature just won't count. There is no penalty. It doesn't disqualify other signatures on the petition. It simply, in effect, is virtually lined out the second time. So if you're unsure, please do it again, because it's complicated. We've done it twice before. It's very possible that you signed the constitutional initiative and not this one. So please give us the benefit of that signature.
Back to Mike Bryan. Mike, I understand you have questions from the chat.
I do. Robert Butler had a question. He was wondering if you're aware of other states that have the same or similar disclosure provisions as the one that you're proposing for Arizona.
I wish there were, but right now, if we can get this on the ballot and get it passed, we would be we go from last to first, I guess is the best way to put it. Arizona today is the most tolerant in the country of dark money. And with this proposition, I think we would have the best in place legislation for finding the original sources. Let me give you a quick example of what other states do. California has a very large, this is very California, they have a large bureaucracy that tracks contributions. And I think there are over 400 people, including about 100 lawyers, that are in that particular agency in California. But even there, they can't track back before they can't back multiple generations. In other words, what we're dealing with here today is really legal money laundering. We've got folks who don't want to have their identity known, so they go through exactly the same procedures that the drug cartels do when they're trying to hide the source of their cash. I know a little about that because as your Attorney General, we prosecuted a lot of drug cartels for money laundering. So what a surprise to find out that the same techniques were being used legally by corporations and wealthy individuals who didn't want their identity known to the public, the voting public. So so that's California. New York has a very strong anti-dark money provision, but the reason for that is nonprofit corporations are regulated in New York by the Attorney General's office. Not true in any other state. And they passed really tough disclosure regulations. It didn't have to go through their legislature. So that's one of the reasons that state has very little dark money at the local level. Some of the other eastern states, Rhode Island, Delaware, Connecticut, have pretty good disclosure rules, certainly much better than ours, but they don't go as far as this proposition would go. The nearest analogy is the Disclose Act, also known as H.R. 1 at the U.S. Congress. That is very similar to what we're proposing here in terms of how you trace the money back to the original source. And that's not a surprise. The same people that counseled on the drafting of the Disclose Act were the group in Washington that we used to help to draft this proposition. It's called the Campaign Legal Center. It's a bipartisan group of lawyers, mostly previous FEC lawyers, and they were a huge help to us in trying to get this put together. And they were also a big help to Congress in getting the Disclose Act. Now, people immediately say, well, if the Disclose Act passes, then you don't need Stop Dark Money. Not true. The Disclose Act, if it's passed, and I hope very strongly that it will be, only applies to federal races, to Senate and Congress and to the presidency. What Stop Dark Money applies to is everything else at the state level. So it would be statewide offices, legislative offices, city council offices, and school board offices. In other words, everything down below the federal would be covered by ours. So let me just say very passionately, we need both.
Okay, I think we've exhausted all of the questions from the audience. Would you tell us how people can get a hold of you, how they can volunteer, and what we can do, Democrats of Greater Tucson, to support you?
Thank you, Larry. And the first thing, and I hope this happens soon, is go back to having in-person meetings where we can circulate petitions. But absent that, which has always been a very strong source of good support for not just this, but so many other publicly oriented initiatives, please go to the website. It's stopdarkmoney.com. And if you're still in our past environment, which was Outlaw Dirty Money, outlawdirtymoney.com also gets you to the same website. That has significant information, how to volunteer, how to contribute if you want to. There you go. That's our website. Thank you for putting it up. With, I think, a very graphic presentation that says, here's what dark money does to our voters. I thought that said it as well as I possibly could do it. But the website is, I think, straightforward to the point. Chris has put in the chat the local contacts that you can do to get in touch with us here in Pima County. But sign up on the website or call Chris. We want to get a petition into your hands if you don't have one already. That's our mission. That's what we need to do so that we can make it this year. And please raise your hand, literally figuratively, to let us mail a petition to you or come by and pick one up at the various places that I know Chris is going to have them available. But thanks again for DGT, for the honor of being here with you today on Arizona Statehood Day. And thank you so much for all the support that you've given to this proposition. This is where the push comes in, though. We need that support more than ever right now.
I want to say thank you so much for appearing at our meeting today. I think you're talking to a crowd of people who are eager to volunteer so that we can finally get rid of secret donations that are funding campaigns and candidacies. And with that, I'm going to end the regular meeting. And thank you so much again, Terry. Thank you so much.
We love you, Terry.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thanks.